breakfast, preparing lunch. Good morning to Mr. and Mrs. Giuseppe. If you are in your hammock, good morning to you. You're in the taxi, the maxi, or in your car making your way to or from the market, the grocery. Good morning to all of you. Good morning to Mr. and Mrs. Regis, to my colleague Sharon and Bruce, and all of the management and staff of the Street 919 FM. To Alison Samuel, good morning. Jeanette McDonald, Miss Annette Lewis. Good morning to Mother Tuna Puna. Morning, Angie. Mano. Mr. Port of Spain. Good morning to you as well. Never a dull moment in Trinidad and Tobago here. I see you can also join us on the social media platforms, Facebook and YouTube. I think we are now up. So let's get into it, right? So there was an article I saw in the newspaper this morning. So it's not exactly what I was planning to talk about, and I still don't even know if I want to talk about that. Should I, boy? Should I? No, you know what? I'll discuss that on another day. I wanted to keep in the vein of what I started last week, where in light of the opposition, the obstruction of Trinidad and Tobago having 1,010,000 questions for the government to answer and for the president to answer, and they want answers and answers. And I would have read 2 articles last week, which shows up a lot of questions that needs to be answered by the misleader of the opposition. Questions as to how two men are currently sitting in the lower house who have serious question marks over their heads. Questions as to how, a certain MP would have, as her handbag carrier, right, from 2010 to 2015, carrying the handbag of the Prime Minister, that a company that was registered in 2011, associated with himself and his mother, was able to get over $16 million in contracts. This company having no experience whatsoever in anything, but yet still they were able to eat a food, drink a juice, and all of that between 2011 to 2015. Him giving the Prime Minister, then Prime Minister, $35,000, and can't remember what he gave her that for. Right, a whole $135,000, you can't remember, and we're supposed to buy that. Well, I wanted to raise another issue again today. I've played this clip before, but I want to play it again for the benefit of some of the members of the literati, in particular, one Anna Munsami, who is better known as Miss Santa Cruz, who is always calling the Underground Report to peddle UNC lies. I mean, she is one of the biggest propagandists, UNC propagandists, this side of the town. Oh, and she and I went at it over on Facebook over the last couple of days, and I talk about clueless. I mean, and then when you call them dunce, they vex, right? But let me play this clip again in the interest of time, because it's roughly about 40 minutes or so, and that's just about the amount of time that I have. So, as I said, I've played this clip before, but no matter how many times I listen to it, it just never ceases to amaze me. So some of you all maybe who are new listeners might not have heard it before. So, yeah, let's go.
The microphone hooker.
Good morning, Rennie, and good morning, listeners. Thank you for inviting me onto the show once again to discuss this very important matter, and it's a burning issue of public corruption and theft of public money. I will
just give me 1 sec. Let me just set this up here.
Coded language. Maybe I. Stand up for what is right at all times,
Yeah,
particularly for those people who occupy high office and high positions of responsibility. So this is what we're going to be dealing with in this morning's program. This is a massive, complex fraud involving tens of millions of public money that was spent more than needed to be spent. And pitifully, sadly, that money came out of a portfolio that is intended to provide for the needy people in this country who don't have a proper housing option.
It is interesting
so
that this morning
from the mouths of people who don't have enough to provide for themselves. So this is true stealing, and it deserves the sternest possible treatment. So I'm glad you invited me to discuss it. Thank you.
It is interesting this morning you take off your gloves because you were a lot more judicious back in 2013 when you said, well, maybe we're looking at mismanagement here or or the misspending of public funds. It turned out this morning you say gloves are off. Let's just get straight to it. You examined the Calcutta Settlement Land Scheme back in May 9th, 2013 I'm referring to, in which the agency acquired this land. Let me just ask you, first of all, to take me to the beginning of the land purchase, not from where the HDC got involved, but take me back to the original owner, the money that was given him, then taken back, then a different amount paid a little later on. Just lay it out for our listeners this morning.
Yeah. Well, what I want to say, first of all, as a declaration, is that it's a piece of land I'm very familiar with. It's north of Central Park North, and it's on Calcutta Settlement number 2 road, opposite to Madras Trace, which is where there's a Wassa pumping station. It's about 50.5 acres of land, gently undulating land. And I'm familiar with it because I did some work on it before for 4 or 5 businessmen who were the owners of the land. But that was back in about 07 and 06. So I was this is part of my professional life. Our relationship professionally ended about 07 or 08. Not in a difficult way. I carried the work to a point and they were carrying on with other people. That happens. And in 2010, the individuals formed a company and put the property into the company. So the company purchased the property for 5 million DT. That was on the 3rd of February 2010. They had a previous agreement going back to about, I think it was 08, in which they had agreed to buy the property from the owner for $17 million. They rescinded that agreement in February of 2010, and they also granted a mortgage to the owner of the property, that was Mr. Dio Saran, and that mortgage was for $18.5 million. So right away on the 3rd of February 2010, we have a difficulty. We have a transaction in which A buys the property from B for $5 million. A previous purchase agreement is torn up and agreed to be evaporated between the parties. No problem with that. The third transaction is that B is lending A $18.5 million under an instrument called a mortgage. Now, a mortgage is supposed to be an instrument where you're borrowing money and you're using the property as a security. And the tradition, the custom and practice, and the accepted professional way to do it is that a mortgage is normally for a sum that is less than the value of the property, because the lender would want to know that if they're unable to get money and if they sell the property, they can recover their money. In this case, a property that had been sold for $5 million was mortgaged the same day for $18.5 million. So to my mind, and I said so in the formal complaint that I was instrumental in preparing, to my mind it raises an immediate question about the Registrar General's department and his stamp duty department. Okay, we haven't gotten to the HGC yet, because the HGC is down in 2011.
Yeah, I want to deal with this top part here because it also involves the stamp duty
and
issue.
In 2010, we have what appears to me to be very close to a tax evasion question where stamp duty is concerned, a breach of professional practice where conveyancing is concerned, because you're dealing with somebody preparing a mortgage for a property that in fact was just sold for $5 million. Okay, so that it's really and the translation of all of that in
Okay, so I understand that persons may not be hearing us on the radio, but you can hear us on the social media platforms of Facebook and YouTube. So I'll try to see what's happening with that, and if we can have it worked out. All right. So, but in the meantime, you can listen to us on YouTube and Facebook.
Plain terms, is that the property was really sold to the gentleman, the Eden Park people. They're called Point Lisa Spark Limited. It was really sold to them for a sum of money about $24 or $25 million. That's what it really means. But the amount of money that they presented to the Inland Revenue was 5. So they only paid tax on 5. 18.5 plus the 2 years mortgage at 8.5% comes out about $26 million. Now, that's the first
let's just be clear on that. How much they actually paid there? What was it? $340,000? Is that what they actually
taxes?
paid? Yes.
Oh, 350.
And it should have been what? From your calculation, should have been $3 to $4 million.
Let us say it's 30 million. It would have been about $2 million.
$2 million they should have paid. All right. So that's the tax evasion you spoke about. Okay,
yes.
go ahead.
Yes. And then the other thing, of course, is that The other thing, of course, is that going forward, they start to infrastructure the land. So the infrastructure started to be installed on the land. That is roads and water and lights and so on, drains and so on. And at that point, the property was placed with two real estate agents, really. One was Samco, SAMKO, and the other one was something called Golden Key. And I have the Golden Key advertisement on my website, afroraymond.net. And the Golden Key advertisement in 2011 is showing those properties, those lots advertised at $400,000 a lot. Okay, lots from $400,000 a lot. Now, $400,000 a lot, there were only 264 lots. So $400,000 a lot, even if you multiply 264 by 400,000, you're actually getting a figure that it's really just over 100 million. Okay, you're getting just over $100 million. I think it's $105 million, $106 million. Therefore, the mind is boggling. How could one agree to pay $175 million for a piece of land that altogether, at best, could only have been sold for $106 million?
But it was accepted at it was first of all handed to them at $200 million, and they got a discount.
Well, I question that. I question that. Well. Because, I mean, so that's the first, the 2010 to 2011 period is interesting. So they're still dealing with it as a private issue. Because the three transactions that took place on the 3rd of February 2010 took place prior to the 2010 election. And the gentlemen were going about arranging their affairs commercially to develop the land and put the lots for sale. At some point late in 2011, they came to what you might want to call a bend in the river, to borrow Naipaul's phrase. And that bend in the river came about when the land was offered to HDC. And you see, this is what is interesting, Rennie. The first thing we have to do is to identify when was the land offered to HDC and on what terms. Because the Lyndon Scott valuation, to which there have been several references in the public, at the end of November of 2011, the Lyndon Scott valuation was for $52 million. That valuation was executed sort of in the second half of November 2011. Now, when Mr. Scott came back with his valuation of 52, and Scott is somebody I know, he trained with our firm, I know him, I used to work with him for years. When Mr. Scott came back with that valuation, the next thing we hear on the official record, if you read the press and you follow the thing, the next thing we hear is that the company, Point Lisa Spark Limited, offers the land to the HDC in January of 2012. So 2 months later, they offer the land. Which begs the question, why did the HDC request a valuation from Mr. Scott and from others 2 months before? Because the HDC doesn't have money to fling around like that. Why would they spend a fee that will be in the order of $40,000 to $50,000 of a professional fee just for a piece of land that somebody drove by and saw? I don't think so. I think that land would have been offered to them at some point in October or November of 2011.
Let me just ask you a question.
And we need to find out what was, on what terms was it offered.
Understood. Let me just be clear. So this land stood an oasis, or was there also more land available that the government could use if they wanted to?
Sure, there was plenty of land.
Right in that area?
Yes.
Okay, so just wanted to be clear on that.
So the first, I'll come back to the land question, the supply of land question. So the first thing is that there's an issue around the dates. Scott's valuation is November of 2011. Why was he asked to do a valuation? If in fact the first offer was in January of 2012 for $200 million. And there's another issue you raise, Rennie, that's important, which is the issue about the land supply. And I want to talk about that for a little while, please. And the point is there are two issues to look at here. Looking at the immediate question of where that land is. The land is on Calcutta Settlement Number 2 Road, which links Vancouver to Freeport. And it's a back road, so it's west of the highway and so on. It's a good back road. And the area has an abundance of Caroni land. Caroni was closed in 2004. Therefore, if one stood on that land and looked pretty much in any direction, one would be casting one's eyes on state-owned Caroni land that was disused because the practice of growing sugar had been discontinued. So the burning question is, even if the HEC had resolved to build large-scale housing on disused agricultural land south of the east-west corridor, Even if that had been a strategic decision they had taken, why did they need to buy any land, particularly in that area? In fact, a member of the cabinet told me, a former minister of housing at that, a member of the cabinet told me that when Carney was closed, the decision was taken that they are not going to spend any money for the HCC to buy any land south of the Carney because there was such an abundant supply of disused land that was now disused in south and central. They're not going to spend any money. And that cabinet decision, that cabinet policy appears to have been reversed or sidelined to allow this transaction to go through. So the policy, that policy as it was told to me, makes sense in the limited sense of conserving one's cash. There may be other difficulties in terms of consumption of agricultural land and so on, but it makes sense in that sense of conserving cash. It appears to have been disregarded to facilitate this transaction.
The Minister of Housing right there, Minister Monilal, says in criticizing some of the information offered in the civil suit, accused the Minister Young of not knowing the difference between bush and developed land. Address that, if you will. Now, because I'm just trying to follow exactly what the foundation is. They were doing the infrastructural development, that is true. But even if we put that infrastructural, what kind of costs are we talking about?
Well, I think that's an important question to look at in terms of how we go forward. Whether the land was bush or it was developed land. The land was put to the HCC as developed land. I mean, I'm reliably informed that they had to spend more money doing infrastructure because I understand the development that's going there in terms of the number of lots and so it doesn't conform to the design that had been approved before. So in fact they've changed the design and so on. The point is that we're talking about bush and we're throwing words and so on. The point is that way too much money was paid for that land.
Yeah.
I'll put it simply. At the time when the owners, the private sector owners owned that property and there was no contemplation, no active contemplation of state involvement, the land was offered by two illicit agents, Samco and the other company I mentioned. And
which is Point Lisa Spa?
Yeah, Point Lisa Spa offered the land for sale. And
the Golden Key. Yes.
Golden Key, that's right. Golden Key and Samco offered the property for sale at $400,000 a lot. Now ask me this thing. If you are a private owner and you have land for sale at $400,000 a lot, 264 lots, that if all of them are sold on the same day, which is the best possible outcome, and you collected cash on the same day, the most money you could collect mathematically is 106 million.
Yes.
Now, if you could only collect 106 million, how do you turn around a year later and sell that property to the state? And let's just be clear, for 175 million. Now, 175 million, listeners, is $663,000 per lot. So within a year, land escalated in value from $400,000 to $663,000, which in fact is about 64% increase in land value in 1 year. And I want to say, I tell you, and I want to say to Dr. Monilal, I hope you're listening to this. I want to say to you that long time when I was in primary school, I'm a little older than you, they used to say that the cow jump over the moon. But the way some of these political, nonsensical lyrics are carrying on, a little bit again, and the dish will run away with the spoon.
Hello.
So we are not going to have that stealing and that disregard for good public conduct on either side, because I'm equally hard when it's P&M doing their games. On either side, it is not acceptable. We need better in this country. We are not going to let the dish run away with the spoon with any kind of nonsensical remarks. The fact of the matter is that land could have been purchased for $35 million lawfully if the Land Acquisition Act had been applied.
Yes.
We spent $75 million buying that land, and our public treasury spent 5 times more than we needed to spend buying that land. That is the scale of the theft and the waste. An interesting thing to note, I hope Mrs. Prasad Besesa and Mr. Ramlogan could be listening to this bit together with Dr.
I'm
Monilal.
sure the information will get to them.
I also want to say that it's remarkable that this is the first cabinet, to my knowledge, I'm subject to correction, this is the first cabinet in our history, to my knowledge, where there were 2 senior counsel in the cabinet. 2.
Who would know better?
And they ought to understand the meaning and the application of the Land Acquisition Act. All of this, the only polite way to describe it is that they were seemingly oblivious to the legal options. And the legal option would have been to allow the state to invoke its powers under the Land Acquisition Act in the face of an unreasonable demand from a landowner if land was required for a public purpose. All of that, the learned people in the cabinet, Mr. Ramada, Mr. Anand Ramlogan, SC, Mrs. Kamla Prasad Besesa, SC, Mr. Dr. Morilal has a legal training as well. What were you all doing? 60 years of public education to do this? This is a scandal.
The Land Acquisition Act of 1994, which allows the government to move in and take property if they find one that it is not, to go in and take the property for the good of the greater populace, as against it being, if it's unduly asking for too much money from the government. I want to stay with one area there, Afra, because we got to the point of the $52 million that came in from the valuation from Lyndon Scott. However, the HDC did not just take this and walk with it. They had another valuation done, and that is what I want to discuss, because therein lies that question of the $50,000 that is part of the civil suit. So let us talk specifically of what happened. The $52 million was the original estimate given, and how did we get to the 200 being accepted? Who walked in the center there? Who was authorized to go and do a reevaluation of the property, and what happened?
Well, another valuation was commissioned from the Commissioner of Valuations. And the Commissioner of Valuations, for listeners, is the government's valuation officer. So they are the ones who prepare valuations as part of the Ministry of Finance. They have offices through the country. You would have heard of them recently in relation to the property tax that was controversial 2 or 3 months ago. That's right. But the Commissioner of Valuations actually prepares valuations and gives land administration and valuation advice to the state, okay? And it appears that a request for a valuation is made in about February of 2012 from the HDC. And when the opinion was eventually received, I think it was in April of 2012, the figure that the Commissioner of Valuations put onto the same land that Mr. Scott valued in November 2011, 52 million. The figure that they put was 180 million. And of course, it presents a very stark picture, because everybody listening to this program, even those people who might be my detractors, everybody knows that if you have a property to value and you get a private valuator to value it, and then you get the government valuator to value it, everybody knows the government valuator is always lower.
Yes,
it is always much lower. So who is talking foolishness here? Everybody knows that, except when it comes to Eden Gardens. So you get to Eden Gardens and we find a reversal, and this is where the dish jumps over the spoon, and sometimes Rudal, the cow does jump over the moon. This is exactly where it is. And then, so you're reversing reality and trying to tell me that that is normal, and it's not normal.
And it's amazing because for this this great disparity to be presented and nobody challenged it. It went through the cabinet. It was passed. It's frightening. By the way, listeners, those who are not in Trinidad and Tobago, the Land Acquisition Act of 1994 is not dissimilar to what is called eminent domain. It falls under the same heading. All right. So we have this this person from the land validation area can go in and do this, come back with this figure. The cabinet accepted it. It goes in and they pay $175 million for it.
That's right. That's right. So what is happening here is that we have a situation where the Commissioner of Valuations Office prepares a report, and the figure is 180 million. I know there was an earlier letter in which he attempted to dismiss Mr. Scott's valuation by saying it was grossly undervalued and so on and so on. And I want to put another question out there, because we need to understand what is being told to us. We need to act like we're educated. We need to act like this is our country, this is our country, this is our money. These people, up to and including the Honorable President Excellency Anthony Carmona, these people are public servants. They are our public servants. They may be highly qualified, they may be highly empowered by the law, but they are our public servants, and they are supposed to do our work. They are supposed to serve our purposes. And we need to put a robust question out there and ask, in relation to this land, how is it that we got to the point that we were accepting a valuation that was virtually 4 times more than the private valuation, and nobody in cabinet? Just imagine that.
You see, that is what I find most amazing.
Just fancy that.
Nobody in cabinet watching the public purse saw this disparity and said stop.
So let us ask the question, and there are difficult questions to be asked, but so be it. If I make some people uncomfortable, so be it. Let us ask the question. what we are dealing with, and I'm going to coin a phrase, I'm going to repeat a phrase I coined during the era of Mr. Patrick Manning with that unfortunate series of things with Mr. Colahart and Udicott and so on. And I'm going to say what we are dealing with at the highest level of the state, the highest chambers of the state, which is the cabinet, is either a disturbing naivety or a complete lack of rectitude. I'll say it again. What we are dealing with at the highest level of our state, which is our cabinet, is either a disturbing naivety or a complete lack of rectitude. You take your pick.
If you just tune into us.
If you want to play games, pick. You want the left hand or you want the right hand? Which one you're going to pick? Because you can't have it both ways.
My guess is that for Raymond, Chartered Surveyor and Managing Director, Raymond and Per, by the way, in full disclosure, your company did do some work for the HDC at some point, yes. So we just make that very
we
clear.
Work for them, yeah, we work for
right,
them. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. Yeah.
The immediate past president of the JCC.
That's
Address
correct.
this question for me, please. The former minister says this issue was taken before the Integrity Commission dealt with, so why are you going back there?
Well, I think that Dr. Munilal is correct in the sense, in the limited sense, that there was a complaint made, I believe, by Dr. Rowley when Dr. Rowley was leader of the opposition, and I was aware of it, and that complaint at that time centered on an allegation or a concern over the possibility of and I don't use the word bribe, but a commission was paid to an official. I forget the amount of money. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but a commission was paid to an official. And Dr. Rowley made an allegation on those lines to the Integrity Commission. It was investigated, and that investigation was closed, and they basically felt that the matter didn't have enough evidence. From what I can remember, they really rejected the allegation on the grounds of not enough evidence. This is an entirely different matter, and to mix the two matters up, because both of them have the word Eden in it. Eden in it is nothing less than mischief for educated people, Dr. Munilal. Dr. Munilal, learned Dr. Munilal. It is mischief. This matter we are discussing this morning is about the theft and the waste of public money in a huge sum, about buying a piece of land for 5 times more than you needed to pay for it, for buying a piece of land in an area where there was abundant public land available, for buying a piece of land on which I'm reliably informed further money had to be spent on infrastructure.
Follow the money is what Minister Young says he's going to do. Yeah. And in following the money, I am just a little uncomfortable. I am optimistic that this is just a door opening, but I'm a little uncomfortable because the only target I see is a $50,000 alleged bribe that was paid for this valuation situation. But there's a lot more money involved here, and I hope it does not end singularly. I know on the one hand you called back in 2013 for us to follow through with the tax evasion side of it, because something funny had gone on there, clearly from what you articulated this morning. But I'm hopeful that this is not just a $50,000 issue that we're dealing with, and you get a lot more fish when the net comes in.
Yeah, it would be a real pity if what came out of this, a couple of people have said to me cynically, Rennie, it would be a real pity if all that came out of this was that a relatively medium-level public servant was prosecuted for accepting a payment that he ought not to have accepted. That
Hence
would be a
the reason I raised it, yes.
Yeah. And in fact, the real big question is, and I'll tell you what is interesting, Rennie, let's talk about nowadays we have a phrase that we use about anti-money laundering and know your customer and that sort of thing, and one of the concepts that is alive in all of that is the concept of the ultimate beneficial owner. So something will say something is in a company, somebody will say a property is in a company's name, and this company is selling the property to that company or selling their shares. The question really is, for the investigators and those people who try to clamp down on white-collar crime and tax evasion, the question really is, who is that company? A company is not a company. You see, the whole concept of ultimate beneficial ownership goes to the heart. Who is the biological person or persons who own that company? Who are the beneficiaries?
Let me pause you right there, Afra, because that's a very important point you're making, because part of the problem here is you say, well, if Point Lisa's Park, if in fact, they made an offer, it doesn't matter what happened, the government accepted it, we did our we did our proper thing here, they did not do their due diligence, whatever they accepted the figure, we're a pilot, we're a Pontius Pilate. I mean, we have nothing to do with that. However, as you said, if you go to who are the principals, who are the people involved in that Point Lisa's Park, who are the ultimate beneficiaries of it, then you have a wider net to pull in. Go ahead, please.
And the point I'm trying to make is that, in fact, if you examine the Registrar General's files for Point Lisa Spark Limited, the company had directors, and the directors have been named in the press. The names of the individuals are not really material to this matter, because the fact is the company never issued shares. So under the sort of rubric of how one would trace who owns a company, they had managed to find a way to sidestep the transaction. Another interesting wrinkle to note for listeners is that up until the end of 2014, under our country's anti-money laundering laws, any transaction involving land and property, you had to know who the ultimate beneficial owner was, except, and this is the loophole that was beautiful, except if it was a government department or government company or government agency. At the end of 2014, that loophole was remedied, and that was an important step forward. The other thing is that the point I'm driving at is that we don't know who Point Lisa Spark Limited really was. Were there people in the cabinet of Point Lisa Spark? Who was Point Lisa Spark? We know who the directors were. We know they owned this piece of very valuable land. There must have been oil or gold or something there. We know they own this piece of land. But
unique among all the state land that remained from Caribbean. This particular parcel was special.
Yeah. Who are these people? And this is really one of the questions. So the whole anti-money laundering channel of discussion is very fertile in this question. And the other point is that there was a falling out among the parties, and there was a lawsuit, which in fact allowed us to get a lot of information.
Falling out of the parties, you mean the Point Lisa's company?
Those people fell out.
Okay.
The actual private individuals who were doing the business together. And
this falling out happened after the land was purchased?
No, it was before. It started to rumble, and then it kind of spilled over.
Okay,
so they filed a lawsuit in
2012.
They filed a lawsuit in 2012. What is interesting is that they are, at the Point Lisa's people, are actually benefiting from the transaction. I mean, I think some amounts of money have been traced and so on, but the real beneficiaries have not actually been identified. An immense profit was made, as the press has said, over 100 million. I think it's over nearly 140 million dollars in profit was made.
It is one of the reasons I asked you earlier, as a surveyor yourself, the infrastructural work that was done there. What kind of dollar figure you think that would have amounted to?
Well, the lawsuit figures we saw. Let's talk about what we can identify.
Let's bear with me. I'll tell you where I'm going with this in a second. Yes.
The lawsuit figures that we saw, and the lawsuit was filed, and I got a copy of the filing. The lawsuit figures that we saw identified a figure of 29 million. Whether that was actually spent, I don't know, but the person, the contractor, was claiming that he had spent 29 million, and in fact there had been some correspondence where that figure had been agreed.
And listeners, the reason I asked that question is because if the private valuator said 52 million, and then you put 29 million on that, you end up at about 81. How you arrive at 175? Because this is the money that we're talking about. That if I quote something you said back in 2013, you said the HDC purchase must be reversed and the responsible parties investigated and prosecuted as required by law. So I'm trying to identify what are we going after. We're going after the difference of that money when we try to follow the money here.
Sure. Let me just say to you, I will reverse your arithmetic, and I would say to you the $52 million valuation Mr. Scott did.
Yes.
Included the $29 million of work that was done in 2010 and 2011.
Okay.
Mr.
We go to the ads, and I'll continue when we come back.
Oh, what do I wish on my Christmas list? It don't matter. I don't ever get what I want from Santa. Mr. Santa Claus, I think it's high time you take a pause. Well, would you tell me why it's the cause? Why every year I only get socks and drawers? Hey, you say I'm a bad boy, but this year I was good. I behave so nice, I do all the things that I should. It's not cause you're watching, I had love in my heart. No, I was behaving from since the start. I go come to the North Pole, I go coffee in your nose hole. I go pet you, that's nobody doing this ever since I small. Mr. Santa Claus, every year I only get socks and drawers. Well, could you tell me why it's because? Why every year I only get socks and drawers? Get up. When you're making your list and you're checking it twice, you have to admit, this year I was nice. I cut all the liquor and I had the swear. So you better not give me no damn underwear. I go hunt for your reindeer. You think I's a muck? I go in by Sprunter and we go make a little hook. Mr. Santa Claus, every year I only get socks and drawers. Well, could you tell me why it's because? Why every year I only get socks and drawers? Every year I just treat you good, put out milk and cookies and ting. But every single year when it ain't no joke, it's the same nonsense you just bring. Look under the Christmas tree and tell me what is the cause for these ugly Argyle socks and 3-pack of drawers. I not asking for plenty, I don't mind a shirt. Well, Santa, believe me, where else could get hurt? Mr. Santa Claus, well, every year I only get socks and drawers. Well, could you tell me why it's because? Why every year socks and drawers? My aunt get a new car because we get a Rolex. My uncle who break up with the wife, well, them still vex, but you're getting me angry, you're giving me a complex. This year I'm not joking, so here what is next? I go puncture the tire on your sleigh ride, mess up the interior when you step inside. Mr. Santa Claus, well, every year I only get socks and drawers. Well, could you tell me why it's because? Why every year I only get socks and drawers? But wait up, I get a shirt this year. Cyberland, make some noise for that man. Yeah, you in your living room. I get some perfume. I ain't any auntie. I'm a tie. Yeah, cause you know people, man. That's what we saying. But I tell you thank you. What do you mean? Thank you, Santa Claus, because this year I didn't get socks and drawers. But could you tell me why is the cause? Why every year I only get, yeah, one time.
Welcome the Christmas holidays this year with quality and attractive furniture from Stylus Furniture Limited. 2 locations, 51 Rushwood Street, San Fernando and 101 Crackness Village in Princestown. Select from a wide range of contemporary furniture to enhance your home. Now open on Sundays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Call today, 652-2542. Season's greetings to all our customers and friends from Stylus Furniture Limited. Stylus Furniture Limited, for the style in you.
Have you completed an ABE RQF Level 5 qualification? Did you know that the ABE RQF Level 5 diploma qualifications are now accepted as a valid entry requirement for the final year of the internationally recognised, world-ranked University of Hertfordshire's BA Business Administration degree programme? Now, in just 1 year, you can complete your BA Business Administration degree. Contact CTS College on 868-671-2551 or email us at study@ctscollege.com or visit our website ctscollege.com.
Tune in to the Street 919 FM every Saturday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. to listen to the live Temple of Restoration, Pastor Curlin and the team. The Temple of Restoration is located at number 12 Endeavour Road, Chaguanas, opposite the Curab taxi stand. For more information, contact 488-4413 or 777-8691. The Temple of Restoration, where Jesus changes lives.
I'm Shumari Hector. Join me every weekday at 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Street 91.9 FM, alongside my co-host, the Queen of Talk, Aisha Wells, as we address the many lies being told from those on the other side. We will be talking the truth and debunking the lies. We are on our way to victory. THA Elections 2021. Don't miss it. And like I say, activate.
It's only Dr. Rowley, the right choice for TNT.
Tune in to the Street 919 FM every Friday from 9:15 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. with Kingdom Health Services, situated at number 91 Eastern Main Road in St. Augustine. For the program, Health and Healing, merging the old with the new with Brent Diet. For more information, call 318-7471 or 484-0141 or 360-4100. It's all about Kingdom Health Services on the Street 919 FM.
Hi, this is Nicole Huggins. Join me every Monday morning on the Street 919 FM from 9:05 a.m. to 9:55 a.m. Let's talk about lifestyle diseases that affects you today and how we can improve your health with healthy solutions. Call Health and Lifestyle with Nicole Huggins at 1-868-288-1108 or 1-868-275-8359. See you there.
Clarity. It's what we want for our vision. Whether we're working in the office, during our nighttime commute, or watching our TV. Reduce reflections and glare with Supernova anti-reflective coatings by Value Optical. The advanced technology in your new eyeglasses will reduce eye strain, help the world see you better, and enhance the way you see the world. Value Optical. Expert care for your eyes.
Police, good day. Officer Best Price here. Johnny Q Auto Parts Division.
Yes, sir.
I'm here to investigate an assault on batteries.
Excuse me, sir?
Is it true you have batteries selling for $488?
Yes. Power Master, Optima, Vata, and Megastar batteries.
So I can buy a battery for $488?
Yes, sir. For cars, trucks, and boats. Backed and distributed by Massey Automotive.
Which part?
Right here at Johnny Q Hardware and Auto Parts Division, 15 Arabita Avenue, Woodbrook. And our new Johnny Q Superstore, located at Lowlands Mall off Claude Noel Highway in Tobago. You could call 63 Tools.
Alright, thanks, boss. Nah, man. Johnny,
do you have $488 to lend, man?
Hi, what's up, TNT? This is Wayne Johnson out of Brooklyn, New York. I always wanted to do something back home, and we're going to be doing our gospel segment on Mondays from 10 p.m. to 12 midnight. That's 10 p.m. to 12 midnight on 91.9 FM. Listen what I want you to do. Spread the word. Spread the word, TNT. Salvation, full and free. Salvation is for everybody. Mondays from 10 p.m. to 12 midnight. That's 10 p.m. to 12 midnight on 91.9 FM.
Share the live. Share the live. The Street 919 FM on Facebook and Instagram. Share the live. Iowa George on Instagram. Share the live. Iowa TV and Street TV on YouTube. Share the live. The Street 919 FM.
So Scott prepared his opinion at the end of 2011.
At the end of it.
So that $29 million, we're just saying there was a figure that was agreed between the parties, but there's a true figure.
Was included.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Was included. It was not 29 plus 52.
Gotcha.
And I started off saying that the land in February of 2010 would have been about 25 plus 29, so you're getting about 50. You see?
Okay,
that's where we're going.
It's going to be really interesting. What you expecting to get out for us as taxpayers, for the country? What are you expecting to see come out of this civil suit, this civil case?
Well, I think it's yet another interesting development in how we move ahead with the country. I'm happy to see it because there was a particular level of involvement by myself and my colleagues. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I'm a little bit cautious. My optimism is cautious because we are still seeing the specter of governments prosecuting previous governments. And I think when we really make progress will be when we see governments prosecuting quotation marks their own people. Close quotation marks. We're not there yet. So the question, are we there yet? And the answer is we're not there yet. We're taking steps on the road.
There may be another question. The other question to that is, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you deal with what was there before?
Yes.
Or because you've got one thing in front of you right now.
Sure. I'm not.
And if this is indeed a precedent,
yes,
that's being said, because part of the argument, bear with me for a second.
Sure.
Part of the argument raised is this. This government, not this one, but any government, any present government anywhere in the world does not want to prosecute the previous government for fear that when they lose election, then the table is turned.
Yes.
So that is the sort of wink, wink, wink that goes on. However, if the precedent is set here, then it means no sacred cows.
Yes.
So I think this is very very
progress.
important
It's
because
progress,
yes, it is going to help us to expect.
Yes.
Those who do we not say that anybody did anything wrong? We're just raising questions about what obtains. And I'm saying if something comes out of this, it is going to be a wonderful shot across the bow.
Yes. Well, I think that you asked me what I can expect. And the other thing I would mention here is that this is a civil lawsuit. It's not a prosecution, and there are no arrests as far as I'm aware. And it's a civil lawsuit, and the reason for doing that, as far as I can tell, is that the civil lawsuit has a lower threshold of evidence and so on, and therefore there's a higher chance of success if one is seeking to inflict some kind of a penalty or recompense for wrongdoing in office.
The natural extension of that would be, what do you see coming out of this, and do you see anybody being prosecuted as a result of what is unearthed from this?
Yes, I see prosecutions in the future. I certainly would like to see prosecutions, because as far as I'm concerned, it's on the books, it's inescapable on the stamp duty charge. There are other issues of breach of trust and fiduciary duty and so on that emerge, rooted in the civil lawsuit. But really, that stamp duty evasion is a crime. Okay? That stamp duty evasion carries heavy penalties, including mandatory disbarring for the attorneys involved, including 5 times the amount of stamp duty that you evaded has to be paid as penalty for the state. And that money is also given as a reward to the organization that made the report, which was the organization I was president of at the time, JCC. And you see, there's progress, there's backwards and forwards all the time. So this is really a terrible moment to realize that in fact we have this degree of stealing and waste taking place in our country, and of course it's riding alongside with a little companion that is seeking to sort of distract us and call it different names and so on and so on. But what is really interesting is that at that time we made a report. We made apart from my newspaper articles in 2013, it was first mentioned in the budget debate for the 2013 budget at the end of 2012. Dr. Rowley and Mr. Arawi mentioned Eden Gardens, and they mentioned concerns over it and so on in the budget debate. Then I delved into it deeply in the first half of 2013. And the JCC, which I was president of at the time, made a formal report on the 22nd of July 2015. And that was important for 2 reasons. Number one was that the people who had the company, Point Lisa Spark Limited, because I was monitoring this in the background, as they say, trying to jumbie in them. the people who had that company had actually applied to the company registrar to have the company wound up. They said the company is not trading anymore. There was a single asset, we've sold it, and we'd like to apply to have this company wound up. The company registrar, which was her duty, said yes, okay, we can wind it up in X period of time. And she put a notice on their file. They said this company has been applied to be wound up by this date. And our report, the formal report JCC made in this matter, was filed on the same day the company was to be wound up. And I wrote to the registrar and I said to her, Madam,
hold your head.
I'm aware that an application has been made to do this thing. I'm aware you've given conditional approval. But in fact, it is a formal report has now been made to these. We made reports to 6 law enforcement agencies. A report has now been made to these 6 agencies, and no doubt the matter will be under investigation. Please hold your hand. She held a hand. So here we are. So the first significant thing is that the persons involved in that company trying to wind it up and put it in a great big hole and plant a tree on top of it and so on.
You put together a company for a single transaction.
Yeah, a single
it
asset.
is done and then we're gone.
Yeah, that's a normal thing in the commercial world.
Oh, that's normal, huh?
Yeah,
okay.
It's normal. But the second point is this, is that there was an important moment in terms of professional development, because we had a professional association making a report in writing to law enforcement about one of its members. And that was a significant milestone in this country. I don't believe the Law Association has ever done it. I don't believe the accountants have ever done it. I don't believe the bankers have ever done it. I certainly don't believe the doctors have ever done it. The JCC did it. And colleagues, I think it was a milestone. We have contributed to us getting to this point. And this is important.
Afro Raymond, my guest this morning, first guest chartered surveyor and managing director of Raymond and Pear Limited. We're talking about the $175 million paid by the HDC for a property that he argues could have gone for, $32 million initially. However, even when there was a private valuator, he said $52 million, including infrastructural work. It was eventually sold for $175 million. I'm curious about this in conclusion. Looking at the names here who are named in the suit, are you comfortable with this? The 9 defendants, well, 10 of them, Jolene John, who is the former head of the HGC, Henkel Lau, former HGC chairman, Greg Davis, former deputy HGC chairman, Peter Ford, project specialist, former commissioner of valuation, Ronald Harry Lal, Point Lisa Spark Limited, Anthony Sampath, Everell Ross, interesting name, and Patrick Sunting. Are you happy that all parties are covered in this? Save and accept until we get to who the principals behind PAP was.
They have more people to put on that list. I don't know whether they will ever put them, because we live in a country that has all kinds of compromises and so on. I don't know if they will ever get on the list, but we need to put more people on, because, as I said in my earlier remarks, there were attorneys, prominent, well-educated, experienced attorneys, who were involved in preparing all this. This could not have happened without the professional assistance and guidance of attorneys. And another point that emerges in this is that, given that the property was conveyed in February of 2010 for $5 million, which was probably 1/5 of its true value. Given that the property was conveyed for that figure, and that conveyance was at a false statement of consideration. Given that, there's learning in law that represents a defect in title. So quite apart from any question of dollars and cents, why is the HEC buying property with defective title?
Why are they buying it? Yes.
Yeah. You see, and it speaks to the heart of the question, really, because we're talking about, we sort of taking apart the HEC transaction, and there's another way to look at it, and the other way to look at it is to remove HEC from the picture. And this makes it even more interesting. What we call Plan B. Let's suppose Point Lisa Spark Limited decided that they weren't going to go ahead with their own development. They were trying to sell these lots. It wasn't working out the way they wanted to, and they wanted to try something different and to sell the whole thing to one person. So we're talking about Point Lisa Spark owners. They're coming out of the game and they're selling the land to somebody else. And let's suppose that Plan A, which was the HTC, didn't work for whatever reason. It didn't work. Who else was going to buy that land? And how much money would they have paid? Would Mr. Jack Warner have bought it?
And that's why it's so important that you said we want to find out if you put it up at $400,000 a lot, how many you sold? Because it's going to make the point as to whether anybody else would have bought it at the real price, at the price that's probably acceptable as against the inflated one that you presented.
Exactly. Would Mr. Jack Warner have bought it? Would Mr. Dupree have bought it? Would Mr. Lockjack have bought it? The tycoons in the society, would they have gone to Couva and paid $150 million, $160 million, $140 for that land? And you need to contemplate that when you're preparing a valuation in that sort of situation. You don't just listen to the one client. What you're examining is the market. What is the market for this land? Who would buy this land? What would be their considerations as a rational investor? And that's how you prepare the valuation.
The views of my guests are Afro Raymond, not necessarily of this station, but it is in his capacity. I just want to just close one part here. I did mention Everell Ross as a very interesting name. He is actually the officer at the Commission of the Valuation Office who did the valuation, valuing the land at $180 million. He was added in after the initial thing of 9 people, and I wondered if that was to make sure we have something inside of there to bind this, as we do with putting flour with fish to bind it together. I wonder if that was the reason for that, but I'm optimistic that this will go further. We will continue looking at this as more is revealed. Afro Raymond, as you know, has spent a lot of time at the...
Right. So, Afro Raymond, and most of us would know who he is. Chartered valuator, one of the most prominent in this country, and he's been an outspoken advocate for the procurement law, among other things. And, he has been one to... Hold on, one sec. Right. He has been known to go after both PNM and the UNC. As a matter of fact, he was one of the persons who was who had an issue with sandals. Yeah. He was also the one who went after Botiwari with respect to the decision by the then People's Partnership government to give the lands down at Invaders Bay to Dachin Enterprises to develop. Remember that matter went to court, and the court instructed Mr. Botiwari, then Minister of Minister of Planning and Development, to release the legal opinion that he said guided their decision to give the land to that company, and Mr. Tiwari absolutely refused. He refused to obey the instructions of the court. Right? Interestingly about this, and why I say that every time I listen to this, it's always, it's always mind-blowing. Because I would have seen a couple nights ago on CNC3, where they did a story on Spun, and they were speaking about terrestrial lands, which is also now an HDC development, terrestrial lands in Dabadi, which I think was previously a horse farm or something like that, where some people had offered the lands for sale, and they had this lawyer and this other guy were offering this private development, this gated community, and they would have taken monies from people as down payments, and over 10 years now nothing has happened. There's been no development and whatnot. Now there's some issue with respect to the title of the land. But what was interesting to me about that story was reported by Mr. Basant that the HDC purchased terrestrial lands from the terrestrial family for $200 million, right? And this was under the People's Partnership. And that was 128 acres of land for $200 million. But Eden Gardens was 21 acres. And the owners of the land, Point Lisa Park Limited, as we just heard there, had originally requested 200 million, and the HGC brought it down to 175 after it had been valued for 52 by Lyndon Scott. And as you heard there from Mr. Afro Raymond, there was no need for the government to pay more than $35 million for that land. As a matter of fact, they didn't even need to buy that land because there was surrounded lands that was owned by Caroni that they could have used for this housing development. Right? So you pay 200 million for 128 acres and 175 million for 21. But they're all about procurement, right? Where was the procurement in this? Where was the procurement? And since they have questions and questions that they want this one to answer and they want that one to answer, well, as you heard the questions there that Mr. Raymond would have raised, what was the motivation to pay $175 million for this piece of land that was valued at $52 million by an independent valuator? So this is not somebody who had any horse in the race. An independent valuator of note, of reputation, said this is 52 million. And then you had the state valuator come and say, no, that is grossly undervalued. It should be worth $175 million. 175 million of your taxpayers' dollars went to purchase this piece of land. I wonder if the taxes was paid on that 175. I just asking a question. Income tax. Was it paid on that 175 million? Because Mr. Rima would have started off the interview by talking about describing this whole situation as a massive fraud that was perpetrated on the citizens, the taxpayers of this country. Right? And we hear the land was purchased for $5 million, and the issue of stamp duty, there would have been high-powered attorneys and so on involved in this whole scandal. But interestingly, the members of the literati, they won back the $100 million from A.B. Gillen. 175 million of the taxpayers' dollars that they're talking about now went down the drain. Man. And they're not interested in that. How many roads that $175 million could have paid? Let's say 140, because according to Mr. Raymond, the government should not have paid more than 35 million. So they pay an extra $140 million for that piece of land. How many roads that could have paved now? How much less money would this administration have had to borrow if that 140 million had remained in the coffers of the state? How much? All of that is part of the reason why when the PP came in 2010, the exchequer account was at what? 10 billion in overdraft. With the highest energy revenues in the country's history, according to Kamala Prasad Bisesa. When they left office in 2015, just 5 years later, it went up to $33 billion in overdraft, the highest it's ever been in this country's history. $33 billion, right? Mr. Manning built the waterfront. Mr. Manning built the government campus. Mr. Manning built the Chancery Lane building that Kamla turned into a hospital. Napa, Sapa, Prime Minister's residence. All of these things he built, All of these things. And did not take the exchequer account to $33 billion in overdraft. Tell me, where is the comparative in terms of things that the People's Partnership built? Compare that to everything that Mr. Manning built. And he didn't have the kind of energy revenues that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa enjoyed. Highest energy revenues in this country's history. You spend all that and then still put the exchequer account some $23 additional billion in overdraft? And then you all want to talk about this government wasting money? Really? They borrowed money to put in the HSF fund and the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. Borrowed money to do that. Really? And you all want to tell me that is the alternative? That is the alternative? You see, the members of the UNC, the supporters, they don't talk this. Every time they want to talk about corruption under the PNM, they always had to go back to 1970, as I told you, when I had this little exchange with Miss Santa Cruz on Facebook. Same thing I told her. She had to talk about Privat and all these people. I said, again, every time, let's speak of current vintage. You want to go back 50 years, 5 decades to talk about PNM corruption? I don't even have to go back from 95 to 2001. 2010 to 2015 is all we need to talk about. That's all we need to talk about. Right? So, you heard it there. You heard it there. And this is one of the projects under them that irks me. And I will always talk about it until we could get answers from perhaps the misleader of the opposition, the misleader of the obstruction. Munilal, again, you heard what Afro Raymond said there. Munilal playing smart with foolishness, all this kind of dotage excuse and whatnot. You're trying to play on words and so on. Really? His name should be on that list of persons being sued to get back that money. I don't know what's going on with the case. I know, there were some issues with it, but we'll do some investigation to find out. But again, this is the kind of thievery that they wouldn't talk about, but all they want answers and want to talk about Al recusal and who recused themselves and all kind of thing and how much money paying to Faris for the month in rent and all of that. Yeah, but 140 million, that's plenty more than all Ben Faris getting though. Well, they are no concern about that. No, we are right. We don't want to know about that. Yeah? As far as we're concerned, that was money well spent. Bribe. A man received $50,000 allegedly in a bribe to facilitate this transaction from the valuation division. $50,000. But who walk away with the pie? We still don't know, as you heard Mr. Raymond say, who are the real beneficial owners of that property. We were hearing things about people digging, they have vault and safe in the ground, in the backyard, in the house, and in the walls, money hiding all over. $500 million of old bills, old $100 bills, never came back in. Where that money went? Where that money went? They just evaporate? Vanished into thin air? I wonder if any of that 500 million that missing is part of that. But I've taken up enough of your call time. 342-0081-4665391. So, call me. I'll speak on that other issue, that article that I told you about. I'll talk about that perhaps on Tuesday, God's willing. Let me see. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dominic.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes. I'm very happy that your friends, the literati, especially the lady, keeps focusing on Privat and O'Halloran and that kind of thing. It's usually those two names alone they call, eh?
Yes.
Usually those two names alone they call. But you see, I'll tell you something, eh? You are probably, well, obviously too young to know about what I am about to say. But I am of the age group to go back 50 years and more and tell you about some of the thievery that existed in those days. And I could tell you, starting off right now, O'Halloran and Privat were not the only thieves in the PNM. But you see, You see, there were two deputy political leaders under Eric Williams. In fact, after when Chambers took over in 1981, there were two deputy political leaders. That is Errol Mahabir and Kamal Mohammed. Now, I could tell you that from the 60s, the names of those two men have been linked inextricably to PNM corruption and thievery. The list is too long to go through with you because there are a lot of people who want to get in. But I'll just cite two things. One, in the late 60s going into the early 70s, Dr. Williams wanted to come up with an experiment to hybridize the dairy industry in Trinidad. And it looked at something called the importation of the buffalipso. Okay? It's hybrid cattle. The buffalipso. And who was the Minister of Health at that time? The esteemed Kamaluddin Mohammed. What happened after that? They landed in Trinidad. From the eyes and the ears of Eric Williams and the Agriculture Ministry. Between that time, which is about the late 60s into early 70s, and when Dr. Eric Williams died in 1981, he never had a word to say to Kamaluddin Mohammed. Right? In those 20 years or so, he never had a word to say to him. He took a speech from him. Many people don't know that. But if you talk to people who were in the innards of the PNM in those years, they will tell you. Eric Williams was very close to those two men, and he took his speech from Kamaluddin Mohammed. And I will just confine myself to that one example for now. I know many more, but I confine myself to that example for now, for the time being. Secondly, in the 70s, especially in the late 70s, there used to be a phenomenon called government-to-government agreements, where the government of this country, in association with foreign governments, would arrange for foreign firms to do contract work in Trinidad and Tobago. You see the Hall of Justice?
Yes.
Good. You see the Mount Hope Hospital, the Eric Williams complex?
Mm-hmm.
The Hall of Justice was built by a firm called Wimpy. It was opened in 1979. The Eric Williams Medical Complex was built by a French firm called Sodeteg. And the point man in all these negotiations was one Errol Mahabir. And there was talk all then about something called the Japanese Garden as an apparent kickback for doing those contracts, that Wimpy contract, especially at the Hall of Justice. A very large Japanese garden was built at his property. They called it the Japanese Garden. Now, for years, people in the know would know that those two men have been linked to PNM corruption in a big way. But you see, the UNC and the Indians in this country and the illiterati, they would, you realize they never called those two names?
Yes.
They never called even one of those two names? No. But they call O'Halloran and Privat's names alone. You see, their culture is that you accumulate as much wealth as you can while you are alive, and in the afterlife you'll be well rewarded. It's part of their karma. In other words, do it or not get caught. And that's what spilled over into Tande's regime with the airport project, and into the Sessions regime with SIS, and all the other situations where ministers were in very close association with contracts and benefits and kickbacks and so on. When they do it, it's not corruption. Nothing is wrong with that. But when somebody of another race does it, that is corruption. And that is how people who have a certain age group best understand what has gone on over the years between the days of Eric and the successor of today. But let me get somebody else to try to get in and discuss things with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And we appreciate that perspective. Those are two names that are hardly ever, never called, actually. Maybe that's why Nafisa has gravitated to the UNC. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dominic.
Greetings.
And the former teacher that just called. I grew up in St. James. I heard a lot. And one he then told you was lock joints. Lock joint rackets. You see, there's a fellow called Fazio Muhammad that lived a very privileged life because of his uncle. And today, the Muhammad clan holds a grudge against the PNM. But the uncle was a senior member of the PNM. And they know about Privat and O'Halloran, but they don't talk about Earl Mahabir and Kamlin Muhammad, which is his uncle. But those fellas live a very privileged life. But they hold a grudge, Dominic, from 81 when the premier died. And that there was a stench in the PNM, Dominic, of corruption. And they say one of the only clean men at that time was George Chambers. So they hold a grudge and a bitterness. So when they hear this unhappy fella pontificated on the morning, their selfishness, right? But they wouldn't tell people what was the reason. The real reason, they try to put it down as race, was the reason why he was not appointed as Prime Minister, and that they gave it to George Chambers. So the Muhammad clan, Dominic, hold a grudge for 30-40 years, and they're still holding the grudge. So when I see this fella busting on TV anymore, this fella live a privileged life. He eat Balize rice, he draw Balize tea, he and the whole clan, and it's only a matter of time for the visa was to go back home. Because if you know, she gets licks for years as the only standard bearer posing to be PNM, you know. And they torture her. So when she went back home, it wasn't so surprise to me. But they must tell the people the real truth. It was not no race. Why it is their uncle was not appointed lock joint racket of Calypso. Dominic, will you tell me about the Princess Tongman? 2011, a company was formed. Right? $16 million in contracts. And Dominic is not mommy, eh? Mommy is in we home, Dominic, the black home. Mommy and daddy. And their home is Ma and Pa. So Dominic, Ma was given 16, a new company with no kind of experience. Mr. Pararat, Ma was given $16 million in contracts for something they know nothing about. But when they're talking about corruption in the PNM, all they could talk about is Privat and O'Halloran. Talk about Mr. Fazio, talk about Mohammed, talk about Lockjoint, and talk about Calypso. Who was the minister in charge of that? Thanks, Dominic boy. Enjoy your evening.
You too, sir. Thank you much. Let me see here. Hello, good afternoon.
Who's your guest here, Dominic?
Who's my guest? I don't have a guest.
Oh, the recording you're playing before was very, 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 very strong. Dominic, you know why these things are happening in Trinidad and Tobago? Because we have a previous minister who was heading sports ministry. And sports ministry was so corrupt, hell-bent and all kind of alias thing, all kind of mad thing going on. And this man is back on the radio commenting on this previous government. And that is why we have all these issues we have in Trinidad and Tobago. Under that previous government, we had so much names of corruption. We can't even call all. Sometimes you just sick and fed up a thing. But you know why they're getting on so? Because none of them really get the bracelet on them up to this day. So that is why they're getting on so. And they're behaving so. All in the parliament, Remember, it had one of them who was misbehaving in Parliament that had a whole long sum of money in the office.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? A long sum of money. And when you asked him what it was for, what it was, a susu or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, seem like when you're doing corruption, you're getting a slap on your back and telling you, well done, in the UNC. That is what you're picking up. Because look at the people that the opposition leader is bringing back as senator in the UNC in front of the public. So what message are you sending out there for the youth of Trinidad and Tobago? What message? That is why they are so hell-bent on supporting Watson Duke, you know. They were glad if Watson Duke win in Tobago, you know. You know, it's the next story if Watson Duke win in Tobago. You know what they're coming with?
Mm-hmm.
The government falling. Look, even lost in strength to the own people in Tobago. They will kick him and they will kick him like that if Watson Duke only win in Tobago. And they'll say, what, your own people, your own Tobagonian brothers and sisters don't just want you. But you know what they're looking at? With the corruption on the EPNM. Point the corruption on the EPNM. I hear them let's talk about for a building. And on the UNC, that building was rent out. Why didn't you stop the corruption? If you think on that Faisal with his rental and his family building, it had corruption there. Why didn't you stop it then? But you know, all of them that he talking about it. The other building is 12 Avenue, where we can even find with government office, one of the government office supposed to be inside of it. Where we come with that?
CPO office was supposed to be there?
Yeah, but with the investigation with these matters and go on, where they going?
53 million in rent. You know.
Oh, these matters just take so long for this to come to, like I hear a man talking about something here in the bar and you're drinking rum and the police and catch him outside. And he matter done in a blink. But some of these people matter taking 10 and 15 years. We call them the one who did one Castle and the next one.
Mr. Kwaitong.
It doesn't matter. We'll go on with that matter. It did. People make jail outside for this thing. And we don't hear anything about that. And why that happens so that they seem to get off the hook? Because of the UNC, you know. You understand? That's why they give, because the matter's about to try here in Trinidad and Tobago. And up to this day, we don't know what's going on with that. And you know, let me job, let somebody else get a chance, because we believe that once you do corruption and once you do the wrong thing in Trinidad and Tobago, they get a slap on the back. And especially if in the UNC, hats off. The leader that lifts you up higher. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, sir. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Their uncle was the Minister of Health, Kamaluddin Mohammed. It have a village in Sawan, named after them, Mohammedville. After them in Sawan. And I remember when the nurses and them was in Woodford Square and taken against the PNM that uprising against the PNM in Parliament in the Red House.
Yes.
I remember good when Dr. Equilium asked Kamal, he said, Kamal, what happened? How come these nurses take after me? How come? Why they take after me? He told Dr. William, ask them. And I think after that, you see Dr. Eric William, he leave and he went home and he never come back alive. Eric William. I can tell I remember that as a young girl growing up. Okay? Dominic, I'll call you about the thing when you come off your holiday.
Yes.
You know who talking here?
Yes, Jabba.
Yeah. Yeah. When you come off your holidays, when you come back from your holidays, right?
All right.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dominic. Good
yes, sir. Greetings.
Greetings. Dominic, you know what I wish, boy? I wish that some of you, I want to thank you for revealing some of these information. Some of us may have forgotten, but I want to thank you very kindly. for bringing these things back so that people will remember. You want to thank you and Google for bringing up these things. I wish that the government could take some of these, well, I don't know, but they should have access to it too. Should take some of these clippings, and when they're having their meetings, at least stick in one for 5 minutes, like the one with the guy with the was in Parliament who spoke about the taxes.
Yes.
Yeah, he said the tax will be coming back. Just slip that Larry Hawaii, slip that in. Anytime you're going to talk about taxes, slip in Larry Hawaii, where he said that taxes were coming back. And if they had one election, all we paying property tax now, and nobody quarreling here, not a soul quarreling. Based on what Alpha Raymond said, I want to appreciate that recording. You know, it's a legend on YouTube. Dr. Munal is the third richest person in Trinidad and Tobago. It's alleged, based on YouTube, $3.5 billion net worth. Before that, Jack Warner said that he paid for his wife, and Jack Warner revealed he brought forward the checks and so on, where he paid for his wife to study. So, Dominic, brother, I'm extremely happy, and thanks to you and I-95.5 for bringing these facts forward. One other thing again, O'Halloran, I am in the 60s. O'Halloran, I was going primary school. You know they're talking about that still.
Yes.
But don't talk about what happened last week, you know. Or last week, I mean the last government. On the camera. Don't talk about that. But talk about O'Halloran. You understand? So, all right, brother, well, I'm thanking you once again for bringing these facts. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, brother.
You too, sir.
Thank you, man. Thanks.
Right, just one correction. It's not I-95, it's 91.9. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dominic.
Good afternoon, sir.
Calling from Ari Village, Rancho Princess Town.
Yes.
First time caller. The problem I am having in this country now, I am 65, next month I'll be 66, right? So
yes.
I'm around long. Short pants had made a calypso over nothing, 1.5 years. The law is an ass. And I would like to double that. You know, it is more than one ass. Because what happens? If a poor man has a little court matter, that will finish in 10 minutes. But you know, if you are someone in this country who's in a high society and you know big people, your court matter, you will have time die. No, before you die, you will enjoy all your riches, and that court matter will never call. Take, for instance, as the guy had mentioned for Quiet Town, even Carlos John, all those guys out on bail, you know.
Yep.
Pandey out on bail too. Yeah. But you see those cases like it gone into the sea and it sink. Now like the UNC ministers and other ministers who are corrupt, he or she may have matters, but brother, they would have time to live for the next 55 years, happy, luxury lives. They're calling Munilar name, but you see, those fellas cannot be touched, and they know that. Even Ram Logan, even the other lawyer man who was taking the dead guy.
Ramdeen.
That's right. Even Ramdeen. Take, for instance, the Law Association. They had nothing to tell Ramdeen, you know. They had nothing to tell him. They had nothing to tell Ramdeen on that matter. That was never raised by the Law Association. That was never raised. And that is wrong. But you see, this Law Association, only if Dr. Ruiz say quack, the next day they want to have a conference, have a media. Dr. Ruiz said this and Dr. Ruiz said that. But boy, this country, the law must change, because every year they have big thing for lawyers and blah, 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 blah. But it remains the same. And that is what having young bandits doing what they are doing today. Because they are seeing, Dominic, that people are getting away with worse than murder. Look at millions of dollars in those land businesses, and that just dying or something. But as the gentleman said before me, try to do something that the PNM or the PNM PRO give it to her and let them try to get that on the airway, because that is very important, Dominic, that is very, very, very important, because you see, there are people in this country who only remember yesterday, and not last one and one with one last year. Anyway, brother, have a beautiful day. It was nice being on your program. Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir, and feel free to call again.
Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon.
Dominic.
Yes, sir.
Good day.
Greetings.
I had to get into the program in the mornings, boy.
Yes.
Morning to Mr. Chance. Good afternoon, Mr. Chance. Teresa Conley, Mommy Stores. Claire, Madam, I've been Lavanti, boy. I know they're listening. Yes, Dominic, yes, I know Mr. Chance in a kind of mood because I'm Mr. Pilgrim.
Yes.
Condolences to their family, Mr. Primlin, and them, right? All, may God give them health and strength. Dominic, you know something, what throughout this whole thing? You see the pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
Something I was following. There was a commissioner inquiry in some land going to Point Forte.
Yes.
I think about Monday, DZ, somewhere wrong there.
Yes.
Right? That they inflate prices on some land going to building that highway. And the pandemic threw off those inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And when I hear Afro Raymond this morning on your program talking, it brings back memories of certain things to me.
Yes.
But, Dominic, as Dr. Rowley has said, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are very intelligent, You always open or end a speech with that. Because what they are trying to do, they are trying to use the judiciary as the executive power. They have, it has separation of powers, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. When the executive make a law and they figure they can win it in court, they run to the judiciary to block it. We, the citizens, have seen what's going on, because if, Dominic, what are the cases that get obstructed in Section 34, right? That was done by a government, right? Petrotrin, right? Which where they talk about the guy bash and cost us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, so much money to pay that guy, and also live sport. Dominic, we have to keep a close eye on the judiciary, as the guy was talking before. Up to now, some of the numeraries like Martin Daly, Winston James, Selvin Kojo, Marion Brown, and all these guys, they never say nothing about the judiciary, about Ramdeen, about that case. They could talk about anything else, but none of them mention Ramdeen, and them should not be practicing law after what they have done. So we have a close eye on what's happening in Trinidad, and this government right now has saved the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago so much money that if look at crep interchange, look at the price we get for being done. This morning I opened the Express, I see something about the Green Fund, about $600 million being saved here, right? Different project, right? They have saved us money, right? And if it was another government, if it wasn't the partnership or the UNC, we might have to go to the IMF. So, Dr. Rowley, keep on doing the job you are doing. I see you went out to Shell in Scotland, and you bring some good news to us. Getting the contract with the Manatee Field with Venezuela to extract that gas by November the 17th to sign that contract. We appreciate what you have done in Scotland. You then went and play golf, but you come back home with some goodies, sir. So we are listening to you very carefully. With the climate change, what's going to happen too, we're going to see how that would work out to help our benefit with the electric cars and hydrocarbons. But we will be listening. Okay? But now, Dominic, we can't lose Tobago because we can't end up when a court order audit and you see the malfunction and description, see the books to put a guy like that to run the Tobago Head Assembly. All right? Dominic, have a good day. I'll try to get into the week.
Thank you, sir. All right, so I think I have time for one more. Quick. Hello, good afternoon.
Dominic, good afternoon.
Yes, sir, good afternoon.
Dominic, I would like to hear when you talk about Mr. Manning, you know.
Yes.
I will leave it here.
Thank you, Mr. Leave it there. Don't worry, we'll talk about Mr. Manning soon enough. Right, so that commission of inquiry into the land acquisition for Point Fortin is supposed to take place, supposed to start this month under Justice Sebastian Vento, retired Justice Sebastian Vento, where we had families collecting, one family getting paid for the land. So all five members of the family were compensated for the land, the same amount. So if the land worth 1 million, everybody get $1 million each. Nothing wrong with that. I can take one quick one. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dominic. Well,
Kingsley, you have 2 minutes.
So, I'm trying to go fast. Dominic, I come to call all the people again this evening here, but tomorrow I'll finish it out on Mr. Dick's program. The deceitfulness in this country, I cannot accept it no more. Because we cannot be saying that leave our children alone for some job or for the vaccine. But our children going in school, giving lap dance, where is the protest for that? Our children going in school, shooting, robbing, doing all kind of crap in this country. Where is our protest for that? How we reach this stage that leave our children alone for vaccine? You have a daughter and she's 15 years old and she outside after 12 in the mid-morning. She late outside. You have your boy's son and he out on the block looking the block. How we reach this stage? How we reach this stage that leave my children now and we reach that thing that save our children. How because of vaccine save our children? Our children going to trade. We have girls going in school, giving lap dance. Where is the protest for that? Oh my gosh. We have school children going in school with guns in the school bag and knife in the school bag. Where is the protest for that to save our children? Dominic, I'm going to beat them this week. They're too deceitful. They're too nasty. And we have to expose them. We have to call them out. Unholy.
Thank you, Kingsley. So that's all the time we have for calls today. So join Sharon and Bruce in the morning, Titans of Democracy, from about 6:15. And God's willing, I will be back on Tuesday. I notice I'm seeing videos all over Facebook with the PDP opening offices all over the place. Again, I asked the question, where the money coming from? Accountability. Does the PDP have a bank account? We established why they can't. Where the money coming from? I don't know. I'm asking the question. Is the PSA, the bank account of the PSA funding the campaign of the PDP? I don't know. But we will deal with all of that in the coming week. All right, so stay locked to the Street 919 FM. Coming up next, of course, will be Pastor Johnson. So we have the ads before that. And yeah, so enjoy the rest of your Sunday, the rest of your weekend. And I will be back with you on Tuesday, please God. We'll continue the conversation. So I'm out.
The views expressed are not necessarily the views of the management of the Street 919 FM.
Thank you, CTS College.